Another reason is Israel being the time clock. What's going on there? And if you look at them as a clock, which a lot of people do, then you would look at their formation is either arguably 1947 or 1948, the recent formation of the State of Israel officially. And so people are pointing out that that would actually be an 80-year anniversary coming up as early as 2027. And what the Bible says as far as the generation that begins to see all the earthquakes and pestilence and wars and fearful signs and great sights and all that will be the same generation that sees everything be finished. And how long is a generation? And a lot of people say, well, that's talking about the fig tree generation. The same generation that sees Israel form is the same generation that will see the very last days. But when I reread that, I did not agree with that. I think that generation is the one that sees the beginning of sorrows, not Israel form as a nation. But still, this is an 80-year marker coming up. And another interesting correlation with Israel that the End Times Berean channel noticed was there was a second edict that there would be a temple rebuild that was done by Sultan Solomon the Magnificent, who was a leader of the Ottoman Empire. In 1537, he made a decree for, I think it was Jerusalem to be rebuilt, not the temple. And so people are looking at applying these 70 weeks that were decreed for Jerusalem, the holy city, which is 490 years. And if you look at the breakdown of that, this is another, by the way, another example of things maybe happening twice, like a mirror. And there was one of those, by the way, in the 1948 years between the temple destroyed the first time, I think it is, and 2018 of Trump decreeing that Jerusalem was the eternal city, something like that. There were two blood moon tetrads, and they had 19s and 48s between them. If that report is trustworthy, it's just another interesting double situation, a mirror maybe of some sort. So, End Time Berean YouTube channel is saying that he's pointing out that in 1537 this decree was made, as far as Israel possibly being some kind of time marker, that there is a Bible verse in Isaiah 60:10. It says, "And foreigners shall build up thy walls, and their kings shall minister unto thee, for in my wrath I smote thee, but in my favor have I had mercy on thee." That's kind of the same message that I just read in Hosea about the second and the third day. But if you follow out the rest of that teaching of the 70 weeks of Daniel, it brings you to a 69 week, and then that last week is supposed to be the 7 years whenever that third temple is there. So that would probably be like the fullest fulfillment of that prophecy. But if there's a shadow of that fulfillment, maybe not a complete fulfillment to that much detail, but this could possibly be a shadow because it doesn't stop at 69 weeks. The 69 week would have been 2020 of this one, because if you add 490 years to the 1537 years, that brings you to 2027. But this gets kind of detailed, but it's interesting to me. The 69 weeks there would bring you to 2020. And so that has End Time Berean channel looking that possibly the tribulation began in 2020. And I'm like, of course it didn't. It's obvious. And even he, when he's talking about it, is saying, well, it kind of don't look like it, guys, but it kind of does. So I'm saying it. But even he looks like skeptical on his face when he's saying this theory. But so I looked closer at it and I listened to him. And it's interesting because what he was able to point out is once more a shadowy thing. There's little things from 2020 that's pointing at the book of Revelation more than you would think, and pointing at a tribulation time frame or the seals. But I think, like I said before, all that's doing is pointing people at we're here. Seals are opening, and we need to be reading that book and realizing what time we're in. So, the second edict of Jerusalem and the walls being rebuilt, that seems to fulfill this verse in Isaiah, was done by Sultan Suleiman in 1537, and there's even a plaque in Jerusalem about this decree. That was the only time people know of that the actual foreigners built up the walls. But once more, this is pointing to 2027. And I was thinking that doesn't have to do with the Lord coming back, it doesn't have to do with the tribulation beginning or the time of Jacob's trouble, but these were the weeks that were declared upon the holy city. So it's interesting and possible that that's pointing toward 2027 is when the temple would be rebuilt, or that whenever it would be first declared and decreed that it would be. Which the temple could be here before the tribulation. I've been saying that. It would be a sign that the tribulation is close. The last 7 years are close, but that would be a strange signifier that the tribulation may begin in 2027, even. Just some ideas. And what he's doing also on this channel, even though he said he thinks the tribulation began in 2020, is he's noticing that there was a big deal in 2020. I believe 9/11 was was the beginning of that, but it started out slower, kind of like it talks about the birth pains. 9/11, it started out slower and not as obvious, gradual. So by now we're into the birth pangs. But he's trying to make it make sense on that channel. I'm wondering about a temple rebuild in 2027 by what he's saying, what he's pointing out there. So I just wanted to add in here that if we're looking at what happened with the attack in October, I believe October 7, 2023, then just like the logic I've been following here, if you added another 3.5 years to that, like if we're looking at the 3.5 and 7 year cycles, just to do it, just to say we'll keep an eye on that, it doesn't necessarily mean anything. But that also is another little indicator that brings you to the spring of 2027. And I don't think that means that we are in the tribulation since 2020, as much as this may be like a warning, an indicator that the 7 years before the tribulation might be flagging toward the tribulation. Kind of like what hit me is a tribulation that started the fall of 2020. It's looking like that's a 7 year tribulation also, and I'm way a lot better, but I don't think everything's going to be completed, finished, and wrapped up. It doesn't look like until probably 2027. I'm looking to the fall of 2027 for that one, but in case we're having 7 year indicators before another 7 year pattern, if not the tribulation. So there have been those before in the Bible, 3.5 year signals that happened with Elijah and no rain, and different indicators there of 3.5 years. So 3.5 years after the October 7th attack of Israel gives you the spring of 2027. So there's you another indicator too. What's interesting too is that September 15 of 2020, which was a few days after I was first attacked, the covenant of the Abraham Accords was confirmed. This is just some of the signs of what he's thinking is like the confirmation of the covenant with many. And so it's interesting that it's a shadow of the tribulation, but I don't think it is actually the tribulation. But he's noticing that this October 7 attack that happened would be like a halfway point, like an abomination of desolation point. He was pointing out what seems like seals might be opening at the earlier part of this decade. Like I said, the people are having that conversation. And so the third thing that's making me look at 2027 is a warning from Mike from around the world.